let's start, guys. Good afternoon, students. Yeah, let's try again. I think you're a little bit sleepy. Good afternoon. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, students, for your attendance. This next speaker, it's a very interesting topic. It's about psychology. So I'm sure that everybody's here for a reason to understand and get some insights about psychology and future careers, maybe your majors, right? So I hope that everyone can be attentive in this session. Now, before we start, I would like to give some introduction about our speaker. She is from the Faculty of Psychology in UPH. She's actually a lecturer, but then before that, she also has a bachelor degree in psychology from Covenant College, as well as a master's degree in Wheaton College in family and couple therapy, right? Yes. So today she will discuss about psychology, future careers that you can pursue. All right. So please be attentive as our speaker explains and shares her insight. So I would like to introduce Miss Christina Claudia to come to the stage. Let's give her a round of applause.
Hello. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. Hi. How are you all doing? Good. It's a little warm in here, but I think we'll do. So thank you for the introduction, but um, I'll, oh, let me turn this on. Is it not on? Okay. I'll reiterate what Ms. Lizzie has said. So, my background is in psychology. I got my undergraduate education at Covenant College, and then I continued with a master's in marriage and family therapy. With that, I now currently work as a full time lecturer at the Faculty of Psychology at UPEHA. Before my master's, I actually was a TA or a lecturer's assistant there, and I got to know some of your counselors and people here. So that was exciting. But maybe a note about my profile and my background is that I received both of my education in the US. And so perhaps my sharing will come from a certain context. So it comes from America. And the second context is I went to Christian schools because that is something that was really important to me. So a bit of my sharing will be related with that as well. Okay, so the next thing is why did I choose psychology? So let me tell you a bit about my story and when I was like your age. So back then, as I was thinking about the career I wanted, an important relationship for me was my relationship with my cousin. So I had a cousin who lived in Bali, and she would every 6 months like travel here. And instead of just spending time with the family, she would always go to this like one doctor's office. And I always asked like, oh, why did she have to go here? I discovered that she was what now we call on the spectrum. So she was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. But in the past, it was PDD, so pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. So that always confused me of like, oh, why isn't she like on something that's specified? And why did she have to travel to Jakarta all the time? Well, back then they didn't have a lot of psychological resources, which has changed now because I think mental health is such a big topic now, which is why you're all like interested. But that was what really got me into psychology. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to take part in the work here to provide more resources for people here. So as I studied psychology, I started to learn about what it is. I took psychology courses in high school, but I think it really drilled into me what psychology was when I started undergrad. So, what is psychology? It's the scientific study of human behavior and mental processes. So, it's not just based on speculation, on observation, it's the scientific study of all of that. And psychology covers a wide scope of topics. So, as you can see, there are many subfields of psychology. I'll talk about a few. So, I was really interested at first in clinical psychology. That's when you look at psychological disorders, you look at how to diagnose people, how do they get these disorders, how does that develop. Um, so there's that. There's also educational psychology, which was really interesting for me too, as I started my undergraduate career, because that focused on how do people learn well? What makes a classroom effective? Is it better to learn one-on-one, or is it better to learn with groups of people? So those are interesting questions in educational psychology. Perhaps a growing field in psychology right now is the industrial and organizational psychology. That's focusing on organizational behaviors. So if you're interested in working in human resources and helping people find the right jobs, or helping um, organizations recruit people, that would be the field for you. So next is a couple of, yeah, as I mentioned, psychology as a science really hit me in college because I never realized how much science was in this field. Um, in my undergraduate career, I had to take research methods and statistics, and that, interestingly for me, was not a big deal. I actually really liked it. But for some of my friends who did not like any like math or science, this was a bummer because I think they thought that we would come in and just learn about theory, but you actually learn a bit more about science as well. And not only taking classes, but you read a lot of scholarly journals. So that will be a big part of the work of the questions you have in psychology, you'll answer by reading research. And lastly, you'll also get opportunities to present your research. So in my undergrad experience at Covenant, we were invited to go to conferences, which was really fun. So you'll do research during your semester, and then at the end, you'll make a poster, and then you'll get to go to a conference and present it in front of like community of psychology like workers. So that was really fun for me, and something I discovered I liked as well in college. So, what do you learn in the field of psychology? So, probably the first class you'll take is general psychology. That will give you an overview of everything that happens. Um, and then the next class that you'll take is probably developmental psychology. So I really liked, so I liked a lot of classes, as you can tell, but I really like this one too, because this is where you learn how kids develop into adults, what affects their development, such as parenting and schools maybe. How does that impact someone um, becoming the person that they are today? So, and you'll learn theories about that and research as well. And then abnormal psychology, which would be the clinical psychology related subject. That's where you'll learn about psychological disorders and what happens when someone experiences that. And then you'll learn personality psychology as well, which is probably more known maybe in social media and things like that. How many of you have heard of like Myers-Briggs, like INFJ, ISFJ? Yeah. And then how many of you have heard of like the Enneagram? Oh yeah, a couple of you as well. How about the 5 traits like neuroticism and oh, okay, more hands with this one. So those are things that you'll learn more or learn further in this course. And then there's also social psychology, educational psychology, and research methods. Now, perhaps that's more straightforward, but okay. Can I go back one slide? Okay. A specific perspective for me, or based on my experience, I specifically chose Christian schools because as I entered that time where you started applying to colleges, I was thinking a lot about what psychology is like and what I want to do with that. And in psychology courses I learned in high school, I realized there's a lot of humanistic elements or a lot of philosophical underpinnings of psychology that I might not necessarily agree with as a Christian, but I don't know how to process that yet. That was a big question for me. So I wanted to get some guidance with that. And that's why I applied to Christian schools, because there you get to meet, thank you get to meet professors who's thought about this a lot longer than like we have when we come in. And so they have a lot of wisdom that they can offer of how do you integrate your faith and your field. So that was just a part of my journey that I'd mention. Okay, next. Okay, so undergrad psychology, what is that like? You'll do probably like a BA or a BSc program if that's in the like US setting, and that'll take around 3 to 4 years. So in Indonesia, the equivalent to that would be sarjana psikologi, and that will be what you'll get if you do undergraduate psychology. Now, internationally, there are specialized programs that you can take. So if you already know what you really like, for example, I really like clinical psychology. There are a couple of bachelor's programs that offer that specialization right away. And so if you already know, like go ahead and search for those programs. I think I'd say it would be good to just explore like what psychology has to offer during your undergrad and then specialize in masters because you'll get a lot more training that way. Okay. Next, what are careers you can have with a BA or a sarjana psikologi or a BSc in psychology? So first, you can be a career counselor or a school counselor. You can work in a school, mentor students, be with them, and you'll probably get to hear more about that with your school counselors as well. You can ask what that's like. You can work in human resources. You could be a recruiter, work with assessments of how to assess the goodness of fit of someone in an organization. You could also work as a trainer, like training some skills if you're interested in communication skills or things like that, and train other people to have those skills. And then lastly, I think this one's really interesting. So this is probably a newer career. It's UX researcher. Maybe some of you have heard of it. That is when you do user research for products. So example, if you use an application and then people like get bugs and sometimes like, oh, it's stuck. So someone has to do research about how to improve that, and someone from psychology will be equipped to do that. So they would research or they'll interview users to see what they can do to improve the design of their products. And a lot of companies might look for a psychology graduate to do this work. So I think this is an up and coming field. My cousin is actually taking her master's in that. So yeah, feel free to look more into that if you're interested. And a lot more. So I did put that there because psychology basically trains you to work with humans. So any job that will allow you to interact with humans, you're probably equipped for. Um, and that's like the greatness of psychology. So a lot of companies would want to have someone who's trained in psychology because you will have more insight into what it's like to work with people and to understand human behavior and thinking. So next, how about if you want to be a psychologist? So that's a bit different from getting a BA or a bachelor's education in psychology. You need a bit more to become a psychologist. So in the US, you'll need a PhD. So usually PhD in clinical psychology or PhD in the field of psychology you want to be a psychologist in. And that might take like 5 years of coursework. Sorry, not just coursework. So that's 5 years of education, including coursework, research, and clinical work. So what clinical work means is that you'll get to intern somewhere and actually be a therapist or actually be a consultant or do assessment work. So you'll have like real life experience with that as well. It's not just course like cognitive training. Next. In Indonesia, it's a bit different. So you'll get now it's actually new. So in the past, you used to need to get a master's to become a psychologist, but now there's a certification program that you can do, and that will take 2 to 3 semesters, and then you'll take an exam. And after that, you'll get all the required like licensure documents you'll need to become what is called a psychologist. Now, Next. Oh, okay. So, how about the other careers? How about me? I'm not a psychologist. I was a marriage and family therapist. What does that look like? So, in the US, there are other careers called the helping field or like the helping careers. And what that means is that you're there to help people. And what are these careers? You can be a counselor, you can be a social worker. So, a counselor will primarily work with one individual at a time, so one-on-one counseling. A social worker might work with big organizations or the government to help like the well-being of families and kids and other individuals. And marriage and family therapists will primarily work with couples and families to do therapy. And with that, they usually have programs for that lasting for 2 to 3 years. And then you'll get more training to get your licensure afterwards. Um, in Indonesia, there is the option to become a counselor, and that will probably take 3 to 7 semesters of education and also internship. Uh, then you'll get a certification, but you won't get a degree. And that's similar to what happens to become a psychologist in Indonesia as well. That certification program will give you a certificate, but not a master's degree. So if you're looking to do more in academia, for example, to become a lecturer or to do research, you might need to continue with other education. Okay. So, how psychology shaped me. Psychology was a really big part of helping me know myself better. So, during those college years, I definitely, I don't know if other people experience this, but I experienced like anxiety, a bit of depression because I was living overseas away from my parents, not diagnosable, but just the symptoms. And with that, learning psychology helped me understand myself a bit better. It also gave me a lot of empathy for other people, for what they're experiencing, because you can't really read a person from just seeing them, but as you get to know them, to get to know their stories, you get to understand, oh, there's a lot more context with um, who they are. And that helps you understand them and have empathy for them. And that kind of leads me to my second part of the career, I guess, the marriage and family therapy part. So, the more I got to learn about psychology, the more I realized the importance of relationships. Like, people are shaped by their relationships. A lot of people who um, say, like, if they're in university and they're experiencing like struggles, it might be with their families, even though they're separated from their families, like they live apart, their families stick with them, and those relationships really matter. And that was what got me into this. So, what is marriage and family therapy? What kind of approach do we take when we see people and when we do work? We have the systemic approach. That's when we conceptualize pathology or dysfunction, how we see disorders or like things that go wrong. We see that in systems and stuckness in relationships. So the example is relational dances or behavioral patterns that people do. So I'll give a story. So imagine you are a therapist and the couple comes in and they're like fighting and they're angry. And they come in, they sit separate sides of the room, and then they say, and the wife says, I am so angry. My husband did not do laundry today. It is his turn to do laundry. I like told him so many times and he did not do it. The husband sits on the other side and he's like quiet and shut down and he looks like still faced. Um, and then the wife is like, get him to do laundry. And the husband says, I will not do laundry. I'm like so tired of this, but I don't know what else to do. And then silence. So, if you're the therapist, you'll get two choices. Do you want to attend to the laundry problem and like tell them like you're going to do laundry today and then you'll do it tomorrow, fix the content, or are you going to look at the process that's going on? And that's the relational dance. So, as the wife is shouting at the husband, criticizing the husband, what she's actually looking for is like affirmation that the husband cares for the wife, right? Because underneath, she is looking for him to say, oh, I actually really care about you, and so I will do that. But the way she's saying it is making it really hard for him to want to do it. Now, what's happening with him? He's shutting down because he's really scared actually. Is he good enough for her? Like, he always gets messages that he's not good enough, he's not doing the laundry right, he's not doing the cleaning right, he's not doing anything right. So he's feeling bad about himself. But all he really wants when he's shutting down is, I want to be right with you. I want to be the right husband for you. So, what you do in this field is you look at that process and you get them to see that process and you do the work to give them a new dance. How can they communicate in ways that are vulnerable and caring and compassionate and don't get them stuck in that fight about laundry? So, that was a bit of what you do in couples therapy. And the most beautiful thing in couples therapy that you get to see is the first session where they sit far apart, they're like shouting, and then the last session, they sit on the same couch and then they're holding hands and they like look at each other and they like tear up because they see that, wow, this is like someone who's really important to me and I really want to fight for this relationship. So if this story gets you and you're like, oh, like I actually do like that, so maybe consider marriage and family therapy because it's actually really interesting. Okay, so next, as I mentioned, you get to work with couples and families, but we also get trained to do work with individuals as well. But you get to see that work a bit differently. So, how counselors will see more introspective work or like what's going on in the person, a marriage and family therapist will do individual work and see their systems. How are their parents affecting them? How are their friends affecting them? How are their significant relationships affecting them? And make sure that the work that is done will help them be in good relationships as well. Okay. So maybe the next thing is a bit of what are the significant lessons I learned from marriage and family therapy that I just love to share with you all. So, the first one is understanding self in relational context, how we are all attachment or relational beings. Like, we all want to be in relationships, it's part of our nature, right? And the way we behave sometimes is because of our desire to be in relationships, to be safe in relationships, to protect us from rejection, or to bring us more connection. So, that is a big way of how I think right now. And the second thing is differentiation. So this was a new concept for me as I entered masters. What is differentiation? It's how you can be yourself while in relationship. So it's in contrast with when you are in a relationship and you lose yourself in the relationship, your identity goes away and you're just the relationship. Or it's also in contrast with when you are not in relationship at all, you don't want to be in relationship, you're disconnected from people, but you get to maintain your identity. Now, the balance between the both of that is how you are differentiated. Are you able to be yourself, have boundaries for yourself, but also be in real deep connection with another person? That is a skill that I'm still learning, that I think is a skill that I will continue to learn. And it's such a beautiful skill because, yeah, I realize sometimes if I don't want to be in a relationship with a person, oh, actually, this is the third point. If I don't want to be in a relationship with a person, am I just reactive or is that a choice? So, the third, probably significant lesson I learned in marriage and family therapy is my life just reactions to other things, to other people, or am I making significant, like intentional choices? So, a lot of the times when we're with people, we react in ways that protect ourselves, right? And we don't actually make good choices. And the more you get to look into yourself and you get to reflect on how your relational context shape you, you get to be able to make more choices instead of react to other people. So those are probably the significant lessons I learned and I'd like to share. And so these are a couple things that I think would make it that psychology would be a good fit for you. Like, are these things, do these things resonate with you? So, the first one is, do you have a curiosity and compassion for people? Are you curious about how people behave and how people relate with one another? And do you care about that? So that would be one of the things. The second thing is, are you interested in psychology as a science and not just based on observations? Are you interested in hearing what people have studied and learned about human behavior? Because that would be a big part of your career in psychology. And the third is, are you ready to reflect? And this is probably more on the helping field or like helping careers and maybe more in marriage and family therapy, is that are you ready to reflect on your own experiences? There's a lot of reflection that you get to do in this field. And if reflections are not something that you like, or you're not like, yeah, it's not your thing, then maybe psychology might not be the best fit, especially like psychology in my field, like marriage and family therapy. I think other fields in psychology will not require you to reflect as much, but yeah, if you want to do therapy, you might need to do that. And then lastly, it's an ever changing field because you work with humans, and humans are dynamic, and humans change. Teens 10 years ago look a lot different than teens today. So is like adults. Adults look very different today than they do like 10 years ago. In this field, you'll work with many different people, and probably every interaction won't be the same. You'll get some guiding points of how to work with people, but you'll get to learn how to be with different people all the time. So if you want something that's like stagnant, like stable and predictable, this might not be the best fit. But if you like dynamic work and you like getting something new every day, then maybe this is a good fit for you. So that's just a bit from me, and thank you for your attention. So I think now would be a good time for Q&A.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Ms. Christina, for giving a very insightful information about psychology, um, not just careers, but in general. And I think either if you want to major in it, you want to major in psychology, or if you want to take therapy, go to therapy, you can always go back to this talk and also understand what you want to pursue in the future, right? We know that psychology is more than just being a psychologist. You can take various jobs and also pursue different occupations in the future. So without further ado, I think we can move on to the Q&A session. If you have questions, please raise your hand, state your name and what class you're from, then you can share. Anybody would like to ask questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. Yes, right now.
Hi.
Hi, hello, Ms. Christina. Let
Hi.
me introduce myself. I'm Austin Deswarasalam from class S214. And I've been wondering, since you're a family and relationship or couples therapist, does that make you immune to these problems that people face in relationships?
Oh, I wish, Austin. I really do wish. Sadly, no. I am not immune. But go ahead with your question.
Then, if you're not immune, what problems do you face when you're in relationships? And do you relate to your, let's say, clients in any way? That's it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's a big question. And like a personal question too. Like, do I relate with my clients? But I'd say, yeah. I think even with that example of like the couple and how they respond or like react with one another, I see that in my own life too, of sometimes being in relationships. Oh, like when there's like a trigger, I react in ways that I know is not good for the relationship and I know is not going to be accepted well, but that comes out of me from a place that I can't control, right? And um, those are the moments where I do appreciate my education in marriage and family therapy, because then I could sit down and like take some time to see, oh, what just happened there. Um, and because it's systemic work too, sometimes like I see my relationships with people and realize like, oh, I probably can't like get out of this myself. Like even with as much insight as I have, like it's really hard. I need someone else to like be with me and like guide me in that. So I think, yeah, I like resonate with my clients. I do think the knowledge helps you know what's going on and helps you map it out. But sometimes the presence of a third person is always helpful. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to ask questions? Yes.
My name is Ruben. I'm from class F104. Do you think someone with a few mental problems can choose psychology and become a psychologist to improve themselves and better themselves? Like,
Yeah, okay. So good question. Thank you, Yuvin. So can someone with mental problems or experiencing perhaps like mental health like issues and struggling with that, can they get into psychology and learn and become a psychologist? I'd say it depends of what you're experiencing. Um, if you're experiencing something that's treated like manageable and you are in the process of managing it, then that is something that, yeah, go ahead and learn and study. But I think one thing that probably is not expected, like in psychology, it can be a reactive field if you're experiencing these things. Imagine like you learn about um, a disorder and in class and it's just like knowledge, but you're experiencing it without getting professional help and like proper mental health care. That might be hard as well. So I'd say it depends on where you are. Are you getting professional help with that? And if so, then yes, go ahead. But if not, like consider about, yeah, like getting help and doing a parallel process of learning and also receiving the help that you need. Does that answer the question? Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, you can. Maybe someone from the back. Do you have a mic?
I'm Lian from F110. I would like to ask, is it possible to work in psychology but also like as a part-time job?
So work perhaps like a therapist or like as a psychologist as a part-time job? Um, I'd say so. So a lot of people go through this education and things happen in their life and they might end up in a different field, right? In a different career. But then they can always go back and use their skills to become, for example, like a part-time counselor or a part-time therapist. So yeah, I think that's doable depending on what you want. It just takes like quite a bit of time to get all that training. So if it's just for a part-time job, like yeah, it's a lot of investment and time. So that's probably my response. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Somebody want to ask from there? Maybe the person from the back first. Yes. Could you please stand up?
My name is Jessa. I'm from F102. This is not really related to the session, but do you have any tips on how to control your own mental health while listening to other mental health problems?
How do I like take care of myself while I'm listening to other people? Yeah, that's a very good question because that's probably something a lot of people experience in this field. I'd say you'd need to have like a community. So something I experienced when I was in the marriage and family therapy program is that we had clinical supervision groups. So every week as we did our internships and we met with clients, we would have like an hour to share perhaps like a case that we had and also share what we're processing in that time. If something's getting kicked up and we're getting reactive, to share about that as well and to get the perspectives from senior counselors or senior therapists in that. So this field is hopefully quite collaborative as well. Like when you're a counselor, you don't just work alone, but hopefully you'll work in a community of counselors or a group of counselors or a group of therapists um, that you don't have to deal with all of that alone. So that's probably one thing. A second thing is um, to like sign up for therapy yourself if it's getting hard. That is something that my professors in the MFT program actually recommended as we started the program to get into therapy as well, to experience it yourself. And also, being in the program itself might be hard because we're asking a lot of questions about like our parents and our families and our backgrounds and just having a place where you can share that with and having professional help can be helpful. So those are probably the two things I would say to that.
Very good question. I think somebody wants to ask from the front row. Could you please pass her the mic?
Um, Hello, I'm Queenie from S201, and I actually already wanted to ask that question, but I have another question. So, how do we um not affect our problems with like our studies and being like a psychologist like that?
Yeah,
I
how
think it's
can
the same question though.
yeah, it's very similar. So I'd probably say similar things too. Like how can you um, maintain like your mental health as you're studying about this, right? Like about these things and about disorders and about, for example, like MFTs about conflicts and couples. Like how do you maintain your own relational and mental health? I'd say with other people as well, like to have a good community, a good social support, and like therapy if needed. So probably similar things.
Any other questions, students? Yeah, go for it. You can have my mic.
Hello, my name is Vira, and I was wondering, what books would you recommend to learn about psychology? That's all.
Oh, what books? Hmm. I feel like there's a lot of like textbooks that I would like give, but that's probably not what you're looking for. You're looking for like a book, right? Um, something, maybe I'll give you something from marriage and family therapy or something from that field because that's a bit closer to home right now. One book that I really liked for like couples stuff is Created for a Connection. So that's by Sue Johnson. She is the founder of Emotionally Focused Couples Therapy, and she looks at how people relate with one another and the cycles they get into, but it's for like the lay person. So it uses like everyday language. It gives like everyday examples, things like that.
What was it called again?
Created for connection.
Creative Work Connection.
Created, like
Oh,
creation. Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Anybody would like to ask? Yes, Enrico.
Good question. What happens when I fail a client? Um, I guess like define failing, but I think I know what you're thinking. Of what if a client like fights and it doesn't work out and they like storm out of my office, like something like that. I think, first of all, as a therapist, I can't control them. I can't control their relationships. It's obviously up to them if they want to do the work. That's when I would get into supervision and get another person, perhaps like a senior therapist perspective or a senior counselor's perspective of were there things that I did that were not the most effective. But if all else, like if we did the right things, they could still also leave. They could still also like not want to do the work. Because I think something I learned is like it's really hard work to do couples therapy or like family therapy because those are really vulnerable relationships for us, right? Like those are important relationships for us. So when you get to a conflict, that might be hard. So that's probably what I do. I'd first of all talk to someone, like talk to a supervisor, talk to someone who's a bit more senior, and then reflect on like what I did. But try to be differentiated as well of like what is my stuff of what did I do wrong, and also like giving them the freedom of like if they didn't want it then it's okay as well, but it's hard, like it's harder than that. Thank you.
Very good question. Anybody else? Yes.
Mm. Define deal with someone, like what were you thinking? A friend. Yeah. So I'd say there are a lot of resources online of like what the experience of someone on the spectrum is like. I'd say, for example, they're very sensitive to sensory things, right? Their senses are very sensitive. And so, how am I creating an environment that is like quiet and safe and stable for them, or like approaching them gently might be helpful in building relationships with them. I'd also look into yeah, what would they say? What would they say as something that is helpful for them? Because yeah, someone is on the spectrum, experiences like similar things, but it is a spectrum. So like every specific person might experience it differently. And I'd ask also like if it's a friend, like ask them like what would be helpful for you, um, for me to be in a relationship with you. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? Yes.
Uh, so you so you study marriage, friends and couples psychology, right? So I wanna ask for advice. I have a close friend that chats a lot with me and likes someone, but it's sad because he can't get over it and still wants to be with that person. So how should I convert him? I comfort him. I don't know. I don't know what to say. So I just like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's really nice of you as a friend. Can we just give him an applause for being a really good friend? Good friend. Um, yeah, I think that's so normal, especially like at the stage of like relationships are really hard. It probably hits you a lot harder as well. Um, I'd say, yeah, like spending that time with him, being present of like what is he feeling right now, or like what is she feeling right. I forget what you said, but what are they feeling right now, and how can you like ask them like what can I do to help can probably be the best way. Sometimes it's not like what you say, it's just like your presence that can be helpful, for them going through this really like hard thing. I'd probably say that. And it sounds like you're also keeping the relation, or like he's coming, or this friend is coming back to you to like ask for more. So you're probably doing something right, and you're already being a good friend. So probably like keep it up and do that. Although I'd mention if it's getting too much, I forget what the context was, but if you're feeling like your boundaries are getting overstepped, or like you feel like you're getting like this is too much of a burden for me, you could also suggest like them talking to someone else, like perhaps someone who's a professional, like a counselor, if that might be more effective. But I'd give it back to you. Is this something that you feel like you're okay with and you're like, okay? Or is this over your expertise? Hope that helps. Okay.
Anybody else would like to ask a question? Very good question. Anybody else? Yes? Who? No? Your friend?
Yeah.
Okay.
Need to, do we still need to introduce ourselves? Uh, I'm Keitaro from S201. Uh, this might be out of topic, but what if we confront someone like who's having suicidal thoughts? Like, how do we help them like overcome it?
Yeah. That's that's really hard, and perhaps something that's very real for like for high school students, because um, yeah, I think I'd say try to offer like a connection or help them find ways to get professional help, to talk to a counselor or psychologist with that if they're experiencing really intrusive suicidal thoughts, because they might need more, just help and space to process that and to get treatment for that, because that is something that's quite serious as well. So I'd say that like, what are ways that you can help them get the help that they need as a friend, or as perhaps sibling or someone else in relationship. Like comfort them as a friend, as yeah, I'd say listen to what they're saying. If they mention that once, like what are the things that they're experiencing? What are the triggers for that? So I think this is something that can be accessible online. There are safety plans for suicidality, and that's something that I used in my practice when I was practicing as an MFT. So those are things that they can do if they're experiencing suicidal thoughts. So first of all, like realizing what are the thoughts that usually come, or like what happens right before that. So if they always get into this one room and they start thinking those thoughts, just to write that down and to make sure, okay, so maybe this is like a trigger. And then find things that they can do to distract their minds for a bit. So maybe like 3 activities that they can do to, if they're thinking those thoughts, to think about something else. For example, listening to music, or like calling someone, and then having emergency contacts. So who can you call if you're really experiencing this? Are there professional people that can help you with that? So to write all of that down, so usually a safety plan is like on a piece of paper, and write it down in a place that's accessible, so that when those thoughts hit, that you can have something that you can use. So maybe something like that. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Anybody else? Yeah.
You think we can be a manipulative person by learning psychology?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Do you? Oh, my name is Gabriel from second year to 13th. And my question is, do you think that we can be a manipulative person by learning psychology?
Manipulative person?
Manipulative, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think anyone can be a manipulative person, and with psychology, you could probably do more things and do more damage. So I think that, like, for sure, yeah.
Uh,
Can
are
happen.
you a manipulative person, Miss? Or
Me?
yes.
I love these questions. They're like quite personal. Um, I think maybe a part of me, yeah. Like there's probably some parts that can be a bit manipulative, but those are probably the parts I need to work on, and I have worked on for quite a bit. That is something that I think maybe manipulative. And let me like define what manipulative is. So I think in relationships sometimes like it's scary to like be vulnerable. So sometimes I like say a lot of things to make myself sound, especially with psychology, you have a lot of knowledge, right? To like say stuff and help people like see me like that wife. But I think those are things that I now pay like very extra careful attention to, because that's not what you want. So like with manipulation, do you actually have a real relationship with someone? Probably not, because you are controlling the relationship, right? It's not a real connection. And so those are things I think about when like those tendencies get into the way.
Do you think manipulative is bad for someone, Miss? Or
Manipulative? Yeah, I'd probably say that same answer of like manipulative, or like being manipulative is a relational thing, right? Because you can't just be manipulative by yourself. Like you need someone else to manipulate. And I think about what kind of relationship do you want to have with people? Do you want a real relationship, or do you want people to just like do what you want? Because that's not real. Yeah.
okay, Miss. Thank you.
Okay. Thank
All right.
you.
I think we'll take one more question.
No.
No? Okay. Sorry. Time is up, I think. All right. So thank you
You can
so
talk to me
much. Yeah.
after, because I'll just be here.
Thank you so much, Miss Christina. So another round of applause for her, please. Okay, thank you. So as a token of appreciation, we would like to give Miss Christina a certificate. So I think I will. Thank you so much. All right. Let's give her another hand and then say goodbye to Miss Christina. Bye.